Hello, everyone. I wanted to do a review of the midterm exam for the course. My impression overall is they were quite good, but some of them weren't, and I felt like the ones that weren't, and I told people when I thought that they weren't good, um, was because people just hadn't been spending enough time with the readings. They hadn't really uh, worked hard enough in the course, and that is easily remedied. Just do the work, become familiar with the readings. If there's any other reason, that is, if you are putting in the work and you didn't do well, then we should talk. But if you haven't been putting in the work and you didn't do well, that shouldn't be a real surprise. So, also, I should say that my grading in the midterm was meant to be actually encouraging, and I didn't outright fail anybody. But for the final exam, you just have to really know the course material in order to pass. So it will be more exacting. And we'll try to have a longer conversation if I'm able to do that. So the final exam will be comprehensive. I'll feel free to ask you questions about anything that we've read for the course. So let's review the actual questions and what kind of answers I was looking for. Question one, sorry, I was editing this. What does the first canon of the NSPE code say? Engineers must hold paramount the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And hold paramount means put first. What does the fourth canon say? I'm sorry. Engineers shall act as faithful agents and trustees of their clients or employers. How may these thought to be in conflict with each other? Well, I mean, the engineer has a duty to uphold the health, safety, welfare of the public. They also have a duty to be a faithful agent of their client or employer. In a situation where what the client, serving the client, may entail putting the public at risk, there's the conflict, some would say. Some would say that the first canon just overrides things, but that may be too simple if we look at BER cases that deal with first canon issues. Fourth canon responsibilities need at least to be kept in mind, says the Board of Ethical Review. So, yes. In BR case 01-10, what should the engineer have done to allow him ethically to accept the offer of the trip? To let the company know that he had no intention of accepting any offer from them and that he had firmly decided in his mind to accept an offer from another company. If he had been um, transparent about that, if he had disclosed the information about his intentions in this case, then he could have accepted the trip. If they had insisted and said, "Well, we want you to come out anyway," then there would be nothing unethical about it. So really, that point is about disclosure. What is the basis and essential features? Geez, I'm sorry, I just edited this. What are the basis and essential features of Sighart's theory of professional ethics? There's two. The first is the professional client relationship, which is key. And this is something you should really keep in mind, that really the whole basis for the for professional ethics, I think, for Sinkhart is the what he calls the gross inequality of power in the professional client relationship, the power imbalance. That for him, it's definitive. That is, that the professional has the knowledge and skills and so is strong, and the client or patient is in need of those skills and is weak. So the gross inequality of power. That's really the starting point for Sighart. You'll see, you reread the essay. because that's the basis for his claim that the professional has to always choose altruism over selfishness, because there's just too much room for exploitation or the professional to take advantage of the client because they're the powerful one. So really the first principle, you might say, of Sieghart's theory is the relationship of the gross inequality of power between the professional and the client. And this is what Sieghart thinks determines the behavior of the professional to always be altruistic with regard to the client, to act for the client rather than themselves. Now, the limit on this brings in the second really important principle of Sieghart's theory, and that is the noble cause. He gives the example of a doctor who could help his patient by poisoning someone else. Of course, can't do it, but the question is why. Sieghart's answer is because it would betray the noble cause of medicine, which is health. So Sieghart discovers another principle of professional ethics that's even more important than the principle of altruism that comes out of the unequal power relationship. And that's whatever the noble cause of the profession is. A lawyer could not, even if doing something unjust would help their client, they can't do it because it would violate the noble cause of justice. Now, whether or not engineering has such a noble cause is, of course, a question. If it does, it probably has something to do with the first canon. I'll explain the basics of Downey's criticism of Sieghart's idea of professional ethics. The first, I think, the first thing that he says is that that relationship of the gross inequality of power exists in all sorts of other relationships, commercial relationships, than just in the professions. That if we take our car to a mechanic, they have the power and we're weak. If we, I don't know, ask somebody to fix our washing machine, they have the power and we're weak. If they have the skills and knowledge and we don't. So to say the gross inequality of power is a defining sufficient feature for defining the professions would be a mistake because it exists outside the professions too. And the question of altruism, well, basically, we say that the doctor or the lawyer or the engineer cannot exploit or do something that takes advantage of the client or patient. And what Downey says is that that's true of everybody. Everybody is bound, at least bound ethically, no matter how they actually act, not to take advantage of somebody else. So if a car mechanic takes advantage of us, or if you know anybody in business, like, that's just as bad, he would say. Finally, he attacks the notion of the noble cause. That is, that to say that the noble cause of medicine is health, the noble cause of engineering is the safety and welfare of the public. That's fine to say that, but he says almost every job could be said to have a noble cause. The noble cause of farming is that people have food. The noble cause of being a travel agent, if you remember when they were, you don't remember when they were travel agents, is people having experience of the world. He even says the noble cause of an underwear maker is our comfort. He's kind of having fun at that point, but you can see his point that why just say that these so-called professions have noble causes? Why not say that the SEPTA bus driver has one, which is the safety of their passengers, if you see what I mean. Lastly, we looked at Kipnis's essay, Engineers Who Kill. And his criterion for when an engineer has acted in violation of the first canon is acting as a menace. That is, if we consider the first canon as an actual rule that can be violated under certain conditions, we would say that if the engineer acts as a menace, which is basically unnecessarily endangering people, then they have acted in violation of the first canon. Now he then makes that more specific by saying that acting as a menace means putting people at risk of death. But uh, then, because of certain problems where it's actually okay to put people at risk of death, as long as you are informing them of the risk and they consent to the risk. The idea of the doctor performing a risky operation that might save a patient's life and things like that. He specifies his so-called first principle, which is just an interpretation of the first canon, as engineers shall not degrade ambient levels of safety without making that information publicly available. That turns out to be the first principle, with some caveats at the end. And finally, what does Kipnis say an engineer must do if they realize that the project they are working on is a menace? Very simple answer: quit the project, not participate in the project, period. He indicates there may be other things under certain circumstances that an engineer might have a duty to do, but he is only willing to say this as being clearly a duty, and that is you cannot participate in the project. So those are the kind of answers that I was looking for. And of course, in any kind of written or oral exam, I have to make a judgment as to the sufficiency of the answers that I received. And I made my judgment. If you have any questions about that, please let me know.